Eating whole foods and avoiding processed sugar was how Black families in the 1950s protected their teeth from the inside out. Grandmothers understood something that modern dentistry would later confirm. Teeth rotted because of what people ate, not just how they cleaned. In households where money was tight, processed foods and store-bought sweets were luxuries that rarely appeared. Families ate vegetables from their gardens, beans cooked slowly on the stove, cornbread made from scratch, and meat only when they could afford it. Sugar came from natural sources like fruits and sorghum, not from candy bars and sodas that would later fill American pantries. Children did not snack constantly on sweet treats because those treats simply were not available. Meals were eaten at the table, and between meals, mouths stayed empty. This unintentional dietary wisdom protected teeth from the constant acid attacks that sugar creates. Grandmothers who raised their families on whole foods watched their children grow up with strong teeth that needed no fillings. Brushing with baking soda every morning and night was the foundation of oral care in Black households throughout the 1950s. Every family kept a small tin or box of baking soda on the bathroom shelf, right next to the sink where it stayed within easy reach. Mothers would wet a clean rag or their finger, dip it into the white powder, and scrub their children's teeth with firm circular motions. The taste was salty and slightly bitter, and the gritty texture scraped against tooth enamel in a way that felt like real cleaning. Children learned quickly that this was non-negotiable. Every morning before breakfast and every night before bed, the baking soda came out. Grandmothers who had used this method their entire lives still had strong teeth decades later. The powder cost almost nothing and lasted for months. Families swore it removed stains, freshened breath, and kept cavities away better than any store-bought paste. That simple tin of baking soda represented practical wisdom that required no dentist and no expense. Swishing warm salt water after meals was a ritual that Black families in the 1950s practiced faithfully to keep gums healthy and mouths clean. Mothers would dissolve a spoonful of table salt into a glass of warm water and hand it to their children after dinner. The instructions were always the same. Swish it around every corner of your mouth. Let it reach between your teeth, then spit it out. The salty taste was strong but tolerable, and children learned to hold the liquid in their mouths long enough for it to work. Grandmothers believed the salt killed germs that caused infection and tightened gums that might otherwise grow weak and bleed. After swishing, mouths felt clean and fresh in a way that plain water never achieved. This practice was especially important after eating meat or sticky foods that clung to teeth. Families who followed this routine rarely complained of gum problems or mouth sores. The saltwater rinse was simple and remarkably effective. Chewing on twigs and sticks to clean teeth was a practice that connected Black families in the 1950s to traditions stretching back generations across the African continent. Grandmothers knew which trees provided the best cleaning sticks, and they taught their children how to prepare them properly. The end of a small branch was chewed until the fibers separated and splayed out like bristles, creating a natural toothbrush that could scrub between teeth and along the gum line. The wood fibers were rough enough to remove food particles, but gentle enough not to damage the mouth. Some families used specific trees believed to have medicinal properties in the bark itself. Children chewed these sticks throughout the day, especially after meals when they could not get to the baking soda. The practice looked strange to outsiders who had grown up with manufactured toothbrushes, but families who used chewing sticks kept their teeth clean and strong. This method required nothing from any store. Nature provided everything needed. Rubbing crushed charcoal on teeth for whitening was a beauty secret that Black grandmothers in the 1950s passed down quietly through generations. The process was messy but effective. Grandmothers would take charcoal from the stove or fireplace, crush it into a fine black powder, and apply it to teeth using a rag or a finger. The sight was startling at first, with teeth turning completely black during the treatment, but after rinsing thoroughly with water, the teeth that emerged were noticeably whiter than before. The charcoal was believed to pull stains from the tooth surface, absorbing the discoloration and carrying it away. Children found the process strange and sometimes funny, watching their mouths turn black before the rinse revealed brighter smiles underneath. Grandmothers insisted on charcoal treatments before church on Sundays or special occasions when looking presentable mattered most. This remedy cost nothing and worked remarkably well. Serving collard greens and leafy vegetables at nearly every meal was how Black mothers in the 1950s built strong teeth and bones in their children without knowing the science behind it. These dark green leaves, cooked slowly with ham hocks or fatback, appeared on dinner tables throughout the week, and children were expected to eat them without complaint. Grandmothers believed that greens made the body strong from the inside, and they were right. The calcium packed into those leaves went straight to building teeth that could last a lifetime. Families who could not afford milk or cheese got their minerals from the garden instead. Mustard greens, turnip greens, and collards rotated through weekly menus, each one delivering nutrients that kept teeth anchored firmly in healthy gums. Children who grew up eating these vegetables rarely suffered from the weak, crumbling teeth that plagued those raised on softer, processed diets. The greens were not optional. They were medicine served on a plate. Chewing raw, fibrous vegetables throughout the day was a natural tooth cleaning habit that Black families in the 1950s practiced without thinking twice about it. Carrots pulled fresh from the garden, celery stalks, and crisp apples were handed to children as snacks between meals. The rough texture of these foods scrubbed against tooth surfaces while chewing, removing plaque and food particles that might otherwise sit and cause decay. Grandmothers noticed that children who chewed these hard, crunchy foods had cleaner teeth than those who preferred soft bread and mush. The act of chewing also strengthened jaw muscles and stimulated gums, keeping the whole mouth healthy. Families did not call this dental care. They simply called it eating. But the effect was the same as any cleaning routine. Fibrous vegetables did the work that toothbrushes would later promise. Drinking water instead of sweet beverages was the unspoken rule in Black households throughout the 1950s, and it protected teeth from constant sugar exposure. Sodas and fruit drinks cost money that most families did not have, so water became the default drink at every meal and throughout the day. Children drank water from the well or the tap, and they did not complain because they knew nothing different. This simple habit meant that teeth were never bathed in sugar for hours at a time, the way modern teeth are when people sip sodas constantly. Grandmothers who raised their families on water watched those children keep their teeth far longer than generations that came after. When sweetness was needed, families used blackstrap molasses instead of white sugar, adding minerals to the diet rather than empty calories that fed decay. Applying clove oil for toothaches was the first response to dental pain in Black households throughout the 1950s, and every medicine cabinet held a small brown bottle ready for emergencies. When a tooth started throbbing in the middle of the night, mothers would soak a tiny piece of cotton in the pungent oil and press it directly against the aching tooth. The relief came quickly. Clove oil contained a natural numbing agent that dulled pain almost as well as anything a dentist might inject. The taste was strong and medicinal, spreading across the tongue with an intense warmth that children never forgot. Grandmothers learned this remedy from their own mothers, who had used cloves for generations before bottled oil became available. A toothache that might have meant days of suffering was reduced to hours. The clove oil bottle sat ready, waiting for the next emergency. Rubbing whiskey on a teething baby's gums was a soothing remedy that Black mothers in the 1950s used without hesitation when infants cried through the night from swollen, painful gums. A clean finger was dipped in whiskey and rubbed gently across the baby's gums, delivering immediate relief that let the whole family finally sleep. The alcohol numbed the tender tissue and calmed the fussing infant within minutes. Nobody worried about giving babies a touch of whiskey because this was medicine, not drinking. Grandmothers had done the same for their own children, and their mothers had done it before them. The remedy worked when nothing else would. Tying salt pork against abscessed teeth was a drawing remedy that Black families in the 1950s used when infections took hold and pain became unbearable. A small piece of fatback was placed against the swollen gum and held in place overnight with cloth. By morning, the abscess had often come to a head or drained on its own. The salt in the meat was believed to pull infection from deep within the tissue. One common remedy used by Black families in the 1950s when a toothache became too severe to ignore was pressing crushed aspirin paste directly onto the aching tooth. Mothers would crush aspirin tablets into a fine powder, mix in a few drops of water, and apply the paste to the painful tooth. The burning sensation could be intense, but the relief often followed. Pulling teeth at home when they could not be saved was a reality that Black families in the 1950s faced without flinching because dentists were either too expensive or refused to treat them altogether. When a tooth was too far gone, rotted through, or loose from infection, someone in the family or neighborhood knew what to do. A piece of string tied around the tooth, a firm grip with cloth-wrapped pliers, a quick, decisive pull. Children watched older siblings go through this and knew their turn might come. The pain was sharp but brief, and once the tooth was out, the suffering ended. Families packed the empty socket with salt or clove oil to stop the bleeding and prevent infection. This was not cruelty, this was survival. Black families did what they had to do because the alternative was living with unbearable pain that no one else would treat. Teaching children proper oral care from the earliest age was how Black mothers in the 1950s ensured that each generation carried the wisdom forward. Toddlers watched their mothers scrub with baking soda and learned by imitation. Young children were handed their own rags and shown the circular motions that clean teeth properly. By the time they reached school age, the morning and evening rituals were automatic. Grandmothers supervised from their chairs, correcting technique and insisting on thoroughness. Nobody wrote these instructions down. The knowledge passed through demonstration and daily practice, mother to daughter, father to son. Children who grew up with these rituals taught them to their own children decades later. The chain remained unbroken. Dentists would not see them, and that forced Black families in the 1950s to become experts in their own oral health out of pure necessity. Segregation meant that white dentists often refused Black patients or charged prices no working family could afford. The few Black dentists who practiced were overwhelmed with patients, and sometimes they were located hours away. So families learned to handle everything themselves. They treated their own toothaches. They pulled their own teeth. They passed down remedies that worked because failure was not an option. This self-reliance was not chosen. It was imposed by a system that denied Black families access to professional care. But from that denial came knowledge that kept communities healthy for generations. Recognizing that these remedies connected Black families to their African ancestors gave the practices a significance beyond mere health. The chewing sticks came from traditions practiced across the African continent for centuries. The herbal knowledge and natural remedies echoed wisdom that survived the Middle Passage and slavery. Grandmothers who taught these methods were not just sharing practical tips, they were maintaining a cultural inheritance that linked American Black families to their origins. The baking soda and salt water were adaptations, but the underlying philosophy remained African. Use what the earth provides, trust the knowledge of elders, take care of your own because no one else will. These teeth-cleaning rituals were acts of cultural preservation, disguised as daily routine. Mourning what has been lost as these grandmothers pass away is the reality facing Black families today who no longer remember the old ways. The great-grandchildren of women who kept perfect teeth into their 90s now struggle with cavities and gum disease despite having access to dentists their ancestors never saw. Something was lost when families stopped gathering kitchen remedies and started relying on tubes and bottles from the store. The wisdom that cost nothing has been replaced by expenses that strain family budgets. Young people today do not know how to make a cleaning stick or why salt water matters. They never learned that charcoal whitens or that diet determines dental fate. The knowledge is fading with each funeral, each grandmother who takes her remedies to the grave without passing them on. Preserving these traditions before they disappear completely is why stories like this one matter to Black families who want to reclaim what their grandmothers knew. Those perfect teeth were not accidents. They were the result of daily discipline, natural remedies, and wisdom earned through generations of necessity. Black grandmothers in the 1950s proved that health does not require wealth. It requires knowledge, consistency, and the willingness to use what nature provides. Their smiles were testaments to resilience and self-reliance. The remedies they used still work today for families willing to learn them. Which of these practices do you remember from your own family? Drop a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe to keep these traditions alive for the next generation.